Hey developers, today we're going to talk about coding bootcamps. So recently I did a video about some negative experiences from a guy named Jason who had a lot of problems with a coding bootcamp called UCLA's Extensions. From that video, I actually got quite a bit of good feedback from people who had positive experiences with coding bootcamps. So today I'm talking to Doug Hirsch. He actually was a instructor at Ironyard, which is used to be a coding bootcamp. So in this video, we talk about the good things about coding bootcamps and actually some things that aren't as good. And he also responds back to Jason in the previous video, so make sure you watch this all the way to the end. It's very interesting. And if you guys like these type of videos, make sure you click that like button and subscribe button. And below, I actually have some links to some of my favorite courses. Make sure you click on those and you can go ahead and get really cheap $10 courses from Udemy. They actually have a sale going on, so make sure you click on those links and buy those courses. You actually help the channel if you do. So let's begin. Hey everyone, today I have Douglas Hirsch. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
Doug is he's a developer. He was actually a former instructor at the Ironyard coding bootcamp before they closed down or they shut down. And so he has tons of experience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Doug.
So, we can go back to my development experience, which started at the age of 12 when I picked up a C++ book and just hasn't stopped. And I'm 36 years old now. I've been through a lot in the field. The whole thing about the teaching was I got to a certain point in my career and I was sitting there and I said, I'd like to really go help the next generation of people that want to get into the field in a way that was not, the usual route of going through, college. And so opportunity just hit me out of the thin blue air and got started with the Ironyard. It was a really just by chance kind of run-in that even happened. But I really did want to learn how to teach people. So that is the best way to go do it. Talking about experience, I have a lot of .NET experience. I have, in fact, initially they hired me at the Ironyard as a .NET instructor, and they asked me on the application, when was the, how many years of experience do you have? And I wrote in there, well, my first program I was paid to write was in a beta of version 1 of the .NET framework. So I've been doing this for a little bit. And they're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And one thing nice about it is, you've been in the trenches, you've taught people how to code, you've gone through that experience. You're able to take what you've learned over many, many years and start teaching people. And so I had done an interview with someone that had a bad experience. Jason, I posted a few days ago, went through a coding bootcamp, went through the UCLA Extensions program. It was like a 6-month long boot camp and definitely had some problems with it. And I know you've listened to some of that interview, and I just wanted to kind of get the other side of the opinion on that, on coding boot camps for people who may have listened to that first interview. And then, what is your kind of general feelings, response? For those who haven't listened to it, make sure I'll put a link below to Jason's interview that I did. But what do you think, Doug?
So I actually have listened to that interview twice. And the first time I listened to it, I was almost yelling at my phone because I was at lunch and I was sitting in a restaurant and I happened to have my headset on and I'm like, wait, no. And so I think the thing is that coding boot camps, they may be put on a pedestal that's a little too high, because in the end it still is learning and it's difficult. It's a difficult subject to learn. But then on the other side of it, it also takes a massive commitment from the person in the program to learn. So at the Ironyard, we taught a full-time program and fought very hard against any talk of a part-time program, strictly because of that same, maybe some of the same stuff that Jason was going through, which was, he was in there every other day or so, or, it was a couple of times a week for a couple of hours in the evening, and he still had his whole life going on around him and it didn't stop. And, software development, and this is the one thing, because I learned when I was 12, I had to be reminded of this. It is not easy to learn software development. It may not take years to be able to go do some rudimentary stuff in software development because, and I would have said the same thing. Like when I walked into the Ironyard, I'm like, there's just no way we can produce a programmer in 3 months, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it my best and see what happens. We produced people that could go and work after 3 months, junior level developers. And they on LinkedIn, I was getting notifications of some of my students hitting their 1 year anniversaries at the places that they went to go work at. So, the main thing is it has to do with the level of commitment. How much of your life are you going to turn over to it? Because 6 months with a few hours a week is not going to make you a programmer. There's just no way. In the Ironyard, we would tell students that were thinking about joining the program, like, it's 8 to 5. We expect you to be in here from 8 to 5, but actually we're open. Our doors are going to be as you need them to be, and someone will stick around to help you out. Um, think about, you're going to actually have to work 12 hours a day on this to make it, and you're probably going to have to put some weekends in too. Is a level of effort we told them that if you really want to come out of here as a programmer, as a junior level software developer, this is the commitment that you're signing up for. It's a boot camp. They don't call it a boot camp for nothing.
Yeah, I think that that's a good perspective. I mean, you definitely have to work really hard at these boot camps to get something out of them. And maybe this style was sort of a part-time where you only a couple times a week, so it's more difficult to really get that experience. But where does the cutoff between what the student is expected to do and what the school is supposed to teach? Because it feels like you could say in any scenario, well, the student didn't try hard enough. I mean, I think some of Jason's complaints was that they had like 40 people in the class and it was split between 2 instructors, and he thought at least one of the instructors wasn't very good and then the pacing was too fast. I mean,
Yeah.
where does the responsibility lie between the coding boot camp and the student?
So first of all, I do want to respond to the failed dentist emo instructor. And so that was, I had to listen to that a couple times just to make sure I had that right. So when I walked in and said that I want to be an instructor at the Ironyard, it wasn't just that I walked in there and they're like, here, fill out this HR paperwork and you're good to go and you're done. We were licensed by the state to teach, and if they're an extension of UCLA, I'm pretty sure they're licensed by their state too. The state does not just let anyone walk in and teach a course. You have to prove that you have the experience to be teaching a course in the subject matter that you are teaching. And I had to actually fill out an application to the state of Texas telling them this is what I've done in the past. This is why I feel I deserve to teach at the Ironyard. It was not just a simple just fill out the Ironyard's documentation. It was so funny because on my second day, this guy just calls me up out of nowhere from the Ironyard, and they're like, "Hey, it's so and so from your regulatory department. Welcome to the Ironyard. I need you to fill this out as soon as possible so we can get it to the state and get you fully kicked in here." I'm like, whoa. But yeah, it worked out, and it required, so for me to teach the class, it required at least 5 years. Well, I had 16, so I was fine. There was no way around it. And then also the my other instructor, he had 13 years of experience. We were very experienced developers that were teaching people. So there was no failed dentists where I worked, and they wouldn't have let anyone in there to do that. Now, we did have some TAs, so, or associate instructors, I think is what we called them. And the associate instructors are really a nice set of people, because where we pulled associate instructors from was a prior cohort. So a really good graduate of the prior cohort that wanted to stick around and solidify their skills more, and they had the time to do so. Like they just wanted, they felt like they wanted to stick around, but they were a really good student. we would bring them on um, as an associate instructor. So they went through this stuff like in the, past 3 months. They went through this, and we've got a whole new group of people coming in where us with all the experience may not be in the same place as those people. The TAs or the associate instructors, they're right there. They're right next to those people as far as like distance and time from when they brought themselves into programming and learned all this stuff. So they were really cool at helping with the initial, helping with some of the lower level, stuff that we may have forgotten about. So we really were set up at the Ironyard to help people. It wasn't something where, we were hoping we were hoping. Now to your question, that I wanted to respond to the other thing, but to your question about where does the school end and where does the student begin? So, and this is going to be personal opinion. Of course, I don't speak for any organization when I'm talking about this, but the idea where the help comes in of going to a boot camp is not necessary, because I saw the comments on the video. Yeah, you could pick you could get a certain set of Udemy videos and you're good to go, right? Well, maybe not so right. And let me explain. Because you've never programmed before, you're brand new to this. You go get this Udemy course and you start working on it, and you hit a snag that is not talked about in your Udemy course, because all you're doing is following instructions at this point. You don't really understand what's going on in the course. And maybe it's explained, maybe it's not explained, but you don't really understand what's going on in the course. And then you do what I used to think was the answer to all those problems. You hit Google. And as a brand new developer hitting Google, it's the most dangerous place on the planet, because first of all, and this is something I learned in my first cohort, as a new programmer, you may not even understand how to read technical documentation. I had to do a lecture on how to read an MSDN article in my first cohort. They just didn't understand. And that's like, how could I expect them to understand how to read the documentation? They've never had any, just even the like sitting there and explaining to them how to read the document. It's they just haven't built the mental models to be able to use Google effectively.
I still have problems with AWS documentation, and I'm a seasoned veteran like you, so you
Amen.
know, anybody's going.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Yeah. That's article those AWS documents, man, I'll tell you. Um, yeah, I'm neck deep in AWS right now. But that's kind of what I'm saying, right? Is that as a new developer, you're going to hit that, and what's going to happen, right? You're kind of doing this thing, you're learning, and you're like, I know some stuff, I know some stuff, I know some stuff, and then something breaks. In almost every course I've taken, something breaks, and usually it's my fault. Usually I've typoed or something like that, but if I don't know enough to go back and look at this stuff and go, I typoed, my fault, you're going to be like, I just don't get this. There's no way I'm going to get it. I'm never going to get it. And you just come down here and then you just kind of like leave. Is what I've seen people do. And what we did in the boot camp is, instead of letting them fall off the bottom, we caught them in the bottom, started pushing them back up the trajectory again. Now, where the student ends and the school begins, we have a responsibility to know those things, right? To basically say, here's the trajectory, and so the first month in our we were 3 months long. The first month we went over all this stuff. It's like, how could you expect someone to know classes? We spent a good bit of time on CSS, even dug into CSS specificity, which my students really hated me for doing so. They're like, we love CSS till you started talking about this. And just going into stuff like that, we dug into that stuff hard. It was not something where we tried to gloss over everything. So it would start off like, this is your computer. I mean, we really did. We started off from welcome to your Mac. You may have never used one. We required Macs to go to the Ironyard. This is your Mac. This is the terminal. This is a direct. I mean, we went all the way from that to let's do some HTML, explained tags and explained all this stuff. So we explained everything that we could explain to the student. But sometimes, and really what it comes down to is that we explain everything, but then you've got to go use it. That's where the student kicks in. So we give them the content. But if you just go home and don't do anything with that content, you don't do the homework and you don't actually just go and do some stuff on your own too, it's not going to sit with you. So the idea, my best students were the ones that, they were doing their homework and then they told me about all this other stuff they were doing on top of it. And you could see it. You could actually see their progress. They really, we had a few school teachers that came through in my last cohort. And those were the guys. They're like, failure's not an option. They did everything that they just, we're not going to sleep till we get it. That was kind of the mental picture I was getting of them, because there were times where I had people, I was like, I don't know if they're going to get it or not. And eventually, because they had the tenacity to push through this stuff, they got it. And part of it is us, right? We help keep you on track. We help monitor if you're learning what you're supposed to learn throughout it, but you're going to hit gaps. Your responsibility as a student would be come to the instructor and say, explain this to me as many times as it takes for me to get it, which I've had sessions like that where I sat down with students and we went over it. And that's what you get. You get the person with 16 years of experience to sit down next to you and go, all right, let's talk this over and talk it through and figure out what's going on with what you're working on. Now, I'm talking a lot, so just interrupt me if
I was
you
going to say,
have a question.
So what I'm hearing is like the boot camp is sort of like the guide rails that guide the student to what they should learn. You also teach them things like how to read errors, how to read documentation, where to go if they have run into problems. And then you also have like that safety net that if they do run into problems, they can have office hours with you guys. And it's their responsibility to talk to you guys and let you guys know if they're running into any problems. Is that kind of
right?
Not completely summarized, but a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what we would do. And dude, I'm telling you, it was the hardest job that I've ever had. It's not like where you would program and you can tell the computer what to do. It's going to do exactly what you tell it to do every day. But when you say, hey, you may want to try this, and the person ignores you, or they don't hear you, or they don't interpret what you said right, it's a whole different story trying to program computers through talking to people. Yeah, it's a way different skill set.
So maybe what Jason should have done, or it's hard to say if he would even have gotten the support, he could have maybe worked with his instructors more, maybe try to get some more of those office hours after his instruction hours. He may have needed, and I didn't ask him, he may have already done this. He may have tried to go and really work on these problems at home by himself. But there might have been some culpability on the coding boot camps problem. Maybe they don't have very good office hours. Maybe they did go too fast. You said that you mentioned you went through a whole month of CSS and basic classes and things like that to really help the student understand some of the basics. Because like web development, like many other principles.
Go ahead. So I mean, basically the way that our program worked was that the first month was HTML, CSS, client-side JavaScript, and then the second month was doing back-end development with JavaScript. So we would give them some Node.js to give them a taste of it. So, let them use the language that they've learned on the client side, transfer those skills to the server side. And then the third month was a specialization period where they could choose like, oh, I want to do more client side. So they would go down the React path. They would learn React.js, or They would learn, I took the Java students, the ones that wanted to go learn Java and do more backend type stuff, and we even offered a Ruby option, but no one took the Ruby option because we kind of said that, hey, we're in Dallas here. You don't want to take the Ruby option. It's not as big of a market for Ruby. So it was a good split. It
Do
was
you
a good
think
split.
do you think that coding boot camps work better in a 5-day a week setting where you're in a classroom for at least 3 or 4 hours compared to maybe the UCLA extension program is more like a normal 2-day a week, kind of like you're taking a summer class or a college class?
And so I said this before, and I'll say it again. The idea that we're going to go programming to full programming to being able to actually work as a junior level developer, that transition, even 5 days a week or 7 if you're doing it right. Remember, I said you need to take weekends and practice some of this stuff. It's that big of a deal. And my best student was telling me how he'd have the TV going at night and he'd still be, he'd have his computer up and he'd still be working on code, which is like, I'm sitting there going, that's great, man. I mean, and he really has done well. Um, the thing is that when you say I'm only going to do it a couple hours a day, I'm still going to go to work. I'm still going to have life hit me. I'm still going to have to handle the stuff for the boss, and I'm still going to have to do all this stuff. You're not going to be able to put the thought, or you're not going to be able to put the time in that you're going to need. Because even at 3 months and in that 5 day a week schedule, it was still breakneck. I mean, it was still very breakneck speed, even though we went in depth and we could help them through as much as we could. Um, it was so fast. I thought that it should be 6 months. Personally, I thought it should be 6 months at 5 days a week, but most people can't take a half year off from work.
So what do you do if
It
you're
just, you
that?
can't do that to someone.
So that's a good point. So what do you do if you're like, if this is you're a mother of two, you want to switch careers and you want, you have limited time. Your days are busy with taking care of the kids, or you have a part-time job, or and then how do you join like a coding boot camp? Or is this the time you would recommend, hey, maybe you should look at self-taught or you should pick up Udemy courses?
That is right, but it's a little bit different. So I'm actually working on, not from the scratch position. Like I'm targeting more of a professional developer in this scenario who's like, hey, I can't keep up with everything that's hitting me, and they have some latent goal and they want to get somewhere, but because of all the messages coming over Twitter at the same time, it they don't know what to go learn first. Should I do machine learning? Should I do React, Angular, Vue? What is it that I need to be doing? But I, from your question, it really would be better to go. I think it'd be better to go self-taught if you only have an hour or two per day to deal with it. The only thing that you have, or the only thing that you need to have, is a really good mentor. Like if you want to go into software development, it would be good to know someone who can mentor you when you hit those snags. That's what you're missing. If you can find someone to mentor you when you hit the snag, and get you past that point, then that's fine. But here's the other piece of it. You still have to have a commitment to learn. Because if you do the programming, if you do the practice, and you only do it like maybe a couple of days a week here, and then a month goes by and you do it another couple of days for an hour a day, and another month goes by, you're not going to pick it up. So it's one of those where you have to say, like, for this hour or 2 hours a day, I promise I am going to sit down and do this. And it doesn't have to be the same time per day, but it needs to be something where you keep bringing back the skill into memory and keep trying to use it. Even like we've told our boot camp students, if you leave the boot camp and you don't get a job immediately in programming, you've wasted your money. If you don't keep programming, if you don't keep doing stuff, because the skill to program is going to leave your mind. The stuff that we taught you is going to leave if you don't use it. And so I think the most important thing is, if you go self-taught, you've got to use it every day.
Let me ask you one final question to wrap it up
Sure.
here. What uh, what are one key, I don't know if trait's the right word, or what's one thing that happened to a student that you saw, maybe in generally, that people who either drop out of coding boot camps or they don't get a job at the end? What is something that you see that really hinders them that from really achieving what they were trying to do? Is it because they don't have the time to work hard enough? Is it because maybe it's a combination of, like we just mentioned, where they can't work well together in groups? I mean, is there a theme that you see? Because I'm sure when you get into a code, when you were teaching classes, the Ironyard, you could probably almost predict some of the people that were coming in who were going to have troubles later on, and some of the people who were going to excel probably in the first week. Can you tell me, like, what do
Right.
you think about that?
So I will say that some of the usual suspects, like expecting that someone who's had some prior experience is going to be really good in the program um, is not necessarily true. It all depends on attitude. Again, I go back to attitude a lot on this because I had a student who had a background enough that I could start talking about some stuff and he could talk about it too with me. But then he kind of had the attitude of, oh, I already know this stuff, so I'm just going to tune it out. And really, it turned out he didn't know as much of it as he thought. And so when we got to homework, he never turned his homework in, and we started having some real issues with that. But then again, I had other students who came in and they were like they really busted their tails. You could tell just by looking at what their pre-work they did before, even because we would say apply to us, right? So some people would come in and go, these are the things that I've been working on in code, and I want to get a lot better, and I want to be sure I get a job in the field. So I'm going to come to you to help push me to the final place where I'm going to be able to get a job. And so that's two different aspects of that whole, like, someone who has already done it. Either you have it's an attitude, either I've done this and I'm not going to listen because I think I know what you're talking about, or you have the one who's, they've done some stuff and they might know what you're talking about, and you know that they know, and you give them extra work. This is where we can tailor it as an instructor, and because we were there all the time, we could see where people were excelling and go, hey, you're doing great, here's some extra work. And that student will take it, where the other student that I had said, no, I don't want any more homework, I don't want more homework than you're giving me. So this is real stuff that happened. I mean, one student was like, no, I'm only going to do the minimum homework I have to do, and he had a little bit, he did get a job, but he had a harder time with it, and we had a really hard time with him. The other things that I remember happening, attitude does come into it. So if you don't think you can do it, that's going to hurt you. If you come in with a fixed mindset and I've already decided that that we're not going to be able to teach you how to program, you're probably not going to do it. What is the saying? If you Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, that it right? It
Mhm.
works in that scenario too. And so I did notice some people came in just thinking there's no way I'm ever going to be able to do this. And it's like, no, you've got to get out of that fixed mindset. We've got to get you into a growth mindset and push you in that direction. But if we can't get them out of that fixed mindset, they're going to be messed up, even to the point where they interview. So in the end, it comes down to, you know, one of the other things you get from going into a boot camp, and this is something that you should research, which is who's on their advisory board. We published that, like, who was, the people could actually access who was on our advisory board, because we were required by Texas law to have an advisory board of leaders in our field to help advise us as to what if we're teaching the right stuff or not. Then you also had our network of like people that were in the program. They would go off to jobs, they would become part of our network. So you had our network, access to our entire network. And but in the end, even with all that, it came down to the final sales pitch, which is when the person goes into the interview, did they get along with the people interviewing them? And I have seen some people who've had a really bad attitude, they just weren't able to sell it in the end. I mean, it just came down to they were really bad at interviewing, which is not something, it's hard to fix that. And we worked with people for a long time. There were people that stayed within career support for a year after the program. We didn't just drop somebody.
Would you recommend for your students to put down the Ironyard as part of their education on their resumes?
I would well, especially when they first started. So when they first started looking for a job, it was one of those things where it's like, hey, put it down that you went here because you've been out of work for 3 months. This is what you've been doing for 3 months. That it should definitely be on here. But we also sent them in not just with, hey, put down the Ironyard on your resume. Here, let's talk about what you've done. This is what, when you go in and talk to people, it's not just about the mark, from the certificate of completion from the Ironyard. It is talk about some of the projects, because when they exit the program, one of the requirements for them to exit is a capstone project, essentially, which is, implement something based on with all the stuff that we've taught you, come up with an idea for a product and do it. We even had one person who did an Alexa skill as their exit project, and she had no coding experience jumping into this, and it was like, whoa.
That's awesome.
And it scared her a bit because she actually told it to do something she didn't program it to do, and it did it.
Wow. That's
and
awesome.
She was like,
Yeah, I've seen some of the stuff coming out of these coding boot camps. I know that a few of them have like a whole night where they'll invite friends or family or other businesses in town, and then they'll do like a show and tell, and every group will present. Did you guys have something like that?
That's what we did.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we did. So at the end of every cohort, we had where basically business leaders and stuff would come through and look at what's happened. Yeah, and family would be there too, because it was kind of their graduation, right? It was the moment that everyone got their certificates, and then they presented their final projects. And so our whole board and all of our network would be there, and they had a chance to talk about code with everyone, and especially the ones that were interested in talking about that. But it was a really great experience to see what people would put together and what they would do with the skills just to put some project together when they never have used code before to do anything.
Why do you think Ironyard failed?
I probably cannot tell. So I mean, if you look at the site, like there was a final message on the site. There was an environmental change. Like they just weren't making enough money to keep the doors open amongst all the campuses. They had, I mean, and some of the stuff I think is public. So the fact that they did take investment, it was funny you brought up the University of Phoenix, because the parent company of the University of Phoenix had invested into the Ironyard. And when they did that, they shotgunned a bunch of schools out across the U.S. to see what would stick. And in the end, it came down to, it probably should have grown a little bit slower. I just don't, other than that, I don't want to go too much more into detail.
I understand.
We had good instructors. Like I had a chance to talk to a good number of the other instructors, because we had a really good community inside. It was in the actual school itself. I could call any instructor up and go, hey, I need some help. I heard you've seen something like this, and they were just more than happy to hop on the phone and help just think things through and stuff like that, just on how to deal with a student in a specific situation and in a certain language or something like that. We had that community. There were a bunch of really good people there. It just business wise, it's what happens when you take money in. Sometimes you don't keep control over what happens, and you have to do what the investors say, and it sometimes doesn't turn out for the best. There was another, I mean, if you remember, there was another really big boot camp that failed right around that same time. So it wasn't just the Ironyard that went out of business. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Yeah, there's the Dev Bootcamp. Yeah, I think there's a few. I was looking it up earlier. Well, that I think we could probably talk.
Yeah, there was one right.
We could probably talk for quite a bit more on this, but let's wrap it up. Thank you so much. Where can people get a hold of you, Doug? I know you have a passion for teaching. Do you think you'll be doing some more teaching eventually one day?
So I'm hoping to go more toward teaching people how to learn. There's a lot of great course creators out there, and I don't, I don't want to be another, I don't want to try to compete in that business. But I think what there really is a lack of is teaching people how to use these courses the most efficiently that they can use them, so that they don't waste their time. That every time they do a course, that they're getting the most out of it. Not a lot of discussion about that. So that's one of the things. That's one of my major passions right now, is to go out and help people with that. Right now, I am in the midst of creating a product that I call the Up-to-Date Developer. It's still in development. Now it's going to be a more of a coaching program. It's not like a video course or anything like that. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And we go through some of the stuff where, we're talking about, like, where is it you're trying to go? We talk about how to get there. We talk about, really down into like the detail of how do you get there. Then we talk about deliberate practice. So the idea of don't just go watch the course 17 times. Go do something and fail at it, and then go find the answer in that course you were watching, because that's where the courses are really good. They're curated. Where don't hit Google, hit that course. That's the thing. And then after that, we talk about, hey, you're going to hit that low point. Let's talk about those low points and help you boost you back up. And this isn't technology specific. It's just, let's figure out how to get you out of that chasm of despair that you're in right now. And then in the end, marketing. So now that you've done all this, you have to tell people that you know this stuff, so they'll come find you when it's time for them to use what you know.
Awesome. So are you, so how can people get a hold of you? And also, I'd love it when you get that course out to let me know, and we can maybe do another follow-up interview or talk about it more.
Sure, sure. So right now, what I am doing, you can follow me on Twitter. I am at dhurst Jr. More than happy to have some more followers. Additionally, I do offer, right now I'm in data collection stage, but I'm also trying to help some people out at the same time, which I offer a free learning strategy session. It's about an hour long, and we do go through this goal setting phase of, trying to figure out what it is you want to do, what you're trying to do, and help put a plan together for you to get to where you're trying to go. And I have essentially I have a Calendly link that I am more than happy to talk to anyone. They're limited slots, very limited slots. So 20,000 people can't just up right now, walk up on me. But I am more than happy to talk to anyone that wants to talk about this kind of stuff.
Cool. I'll put a link in the
And
description.
I'll send that
for
link
some
to
of
you,
that
Erik.
stuff. Cool. Awesome. All right, man. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate your time here. I think this is really useful and helpful for people who are thinking about boot camps, and you have a wealth of knowledge in it. And I think it's also a good counterpoint to, some of the negatives we heard last time. And these are definitely some different views and some positives. All right, man. Thanks.
Thank you.